Welcome, friends.
Alfredo was #1 for you there, Josh.
Oh man, Alfredo, my man. One of these days,
Alfredo.
one of these days when we all are actually able to freely roam and meet at a lobby bar somewhere, right? At a Future Connect event. Alfredo, I fully expect to buy you around, my friend, and meet face to face. It's going to be fantastic. Welcome
Hi,
everybody
Stephanie.
tuning in. Glad you're here. Amanda, I see you. Great. We are expecting another great session today, great webinar. Thank you for everybody tuning in. Excited to get started here. And you might notice we are Sans one regular, right, Will?
Yeah, I'm sorry to have to fill in for Becca, our senior director of marketing events. Has been a very, very capable moderator for the last 7 or 8 weeks, but she had a little baby boy late Friday night, early Saturday morning. Sully Dean Smith at 1:33 Saturday morning. So mom and family are doing great, but you're gonna have to put up with me for the next few
No,
weeks.
I'm glad you're with us, and excited for Becca, certainly, and new another COVID baby we hear about, and so that's so great. Love that, and love that name too. That's incredible. Rachel, Philip, thanks for tuning in. Rebecca, Rhonda, glad to see you guys. We've got 86, so we believe we get. I think we're end up around 150 today or so. We'll see where we end up. We know. We had about 200 registered, and as always, these get recorded and posted to the Connect website afterward and on YouTube. So certainly you'll be able to reference this and share this with others. And yeah, excited for the conversation today. And I'm sure many of you, if you've been following along, you might be glad to finally get to see the man, the myth, the legend, Seth from marketing, right? Mr. Seth Spillman from Nashville National Cowboy Museum. So Seth, glad you could clear your calendar and join us today, my friend.
I appreciate it. Glad to be here.
And then Richard, glad you're here too as well. And we'll just wait another couple seconds and get started. Staci, I can't wait for all of you guys to introduce yourselves and kind of for the attendees to get to know you a little bit better. And on our prep call earlier, we were talking about, just the things that we're seeing, certainly ideas and opportunities. Most of us on the call here are connected in some way, shape, or form to what all of us on the panel represent, right? Whether that's a DMO, it's an attraction, it's a heritage or cultural site, event, something like that. So it's going to be a really great conversation to kind of talk about how we are connecting with our audiences, engaging, and new ideas, right? How are we inspiring new things coming out of what we're seeing? So great. Millie, yes, congrats to Becca and family. We will absolutely pass that on. It's fantastic. Well, why don't we go ahead and get started? Will, do you have any opening kind of remarks or anything that we need to keep in mind?
Oh, no, I think everybody's kind of figured out how the cadence of this. I wanted to just share something. It was pretty cool. To date, since we started this webinar series, we've had over 4,000 registrations, over 3,000 different attendees that actually showed up, and over 2,000 unique individuals in our tourism marketing space from around the country that have participated. And I think it's just been a really cool experience. And Josh, I really want to thank you for agreeing to moderate this, and I want to thank Streetsense for sponsoring this series, because what we're doing is connecting a lot of people in a really challenging time, and I think that all of us will be better as a result when we come out of it and have new ideas, new relationships, albeit some of them virtual, but it'll be a lot of fun when we're able to get back together and meet, and that will happen this year. So
yes.
Well, so thank you, Josh. I'll turn it over to you as our capable and extraordinary moderator for this.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. A couple of quick housekeeping for those that are tuning in. Obviously, feel free to use the Q&A panel. Drop your questions in there throughout the program, and we're going to do our best to get to all of them. I'm allow those much smarter than me to answer them, of course, and we'll do the best we can with those questions. Or, your chat, feel free to say hello to each other just like you are now. Again, just thank you for the time, for joining us. It's time is a precious commodity, and so it means a lot that you would tune in. And why don't we just start at the top, Staci? In my little screen view, of course, I look at this in gallery view so I can see everybody's faces. If those of you that are looking at your screen, you may be in speaker view, but if you change it to gallery view, it's a great way to see all of us at the same time. But Staci, why don't you kick us off, catch us up, a little bit of where you're at. Those that aren't familiar with you, introduce yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. And I want to echo what Josh said. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know that there's a lot of webinars out there. There are a lot of choices. And we're so happy that you joined us in our conversation today. And I hope that we get to hear from you as well. So make sure that you put something in the chat, share your ideas. We'd love to share them because this is a community after all. My name is Staci Mellman. I'm the CMO at Visit Florida. I've been here for about 9 years in different roles within the organization. But I started my career in the not-for-profit sector. I was the cultural arts director at a community organization in Austin, Texas, and I shifted to fundraising and event management while the time that I was there. I worked for the Austin PBS station and Austin City Limits for several years before I moved to Florida back in, when did I move here? 2010. So that's kind of the history in like 2 sentences about my career. You can look me up on LinkedIn. At Visit Florida, we're anxious for travel to, kind of start again. I think we saw a pretty successful holiday weekend, and trying to evaluate what happens next. As businesses are slowly reopening and experimenting with safety precautions and how they can keep both the residents safe, their employees safe, as well as the visitors. So I think it's a tough balance that everybody's trying to figure out, but that's at least kind of what we're seeing from the state level here in Florida.
That's fantastic. Richard, I want to toss to you. Richard, just to be candid with those tuning in, Richard and I have just recently met. So I'm really excited to learn from you today, my friend. What a joy that you would be with us. And you've got such a long history in this industry, and specifically with what we're talking about today. So introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, thanks so much. And now I feel like I'm 100 years old. I appreciate that. It's really a great time to be here in the cultural and heritage conversation. So yeah, thank everybody. For those that I haven't met, it's great to see the 129 participants joining us from around the globe today. Richard Peterson and I head up as CEO the U.S. Cultural Heritage Marketing Council. We also work on a consumer side with our Cultural Traveler Exploring America brand. A lot of people may be familiar with that from all the shows and programs that we do around the United States, really showcasing the best of cultural and heritage experiences throughout the United States and our territories. But long before that, the 3 pillars of the industry are really my background. The first being accommodation, working for Hilton Worldwide, doing global sales and product development for them, really, from coast to coast and working with the international markets of Hilton. And then also a decade of experience working for DMOs, working for Staci's organization, Visit Florida many years ago, Will's organization as well, but also the Greater Fort Lauderdale Convention and Visitors Bureau and Los Angeles Tourism, heading up the international marketing and actually, executing office operations in China and Latin America and Australia for Los Angeles as well. And then the third pillar is cultural, working here in the Bay Area, been in the Bay Area now 15 years. But moved here to open the California Academy of Sciences in Golden Gate Park in 2007, and 7 years after launching that amazing arts, culture, history, and science experience that's there in the park. Really beginning to get the bug to say, how do we bring all these elements together? So the U.S. Cultural Heritage Marketing Council really is rooted in representing and working with and supporting and galvanizing the importance of art, culture, history, heritage, culinary, outdoor, and Native American and African American, and the native stories of the United States. So we really do have our fingers in many different pies. But today it's really about what ingredients the folks on this call really want to talk about and what's important to them. The data is out there. We're all seeing the data. We're all sitting on all the webinars, as was just stated a moment ago. So we appreciate you taking the time. We look forward to the conversation. Thanks.
Yeah, glad, Richard, just thank you for being here. I so appreciate it. And now, Mr. Seth Spillman. Those of you, I know Seth and have known him well for many years, and it's a joy to see you, first of all, because I miss you, my friend. So good to see you face to face. But those of you that are tuning in, you may have heard of the infamous Seth from marketing. If you have caught any of the headlines, any of the fun stuff happening. So Seth, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit and tell us, obviously, here's a softball question for you. What's been going on, man? How are we doing?
There's been a few things going on. So yeah, thank you, Josh. It's good to see you too, brother. And it's good to be back with my tourism folks. So it's just appreciate this. So I'm Seth Spillman. I'm Chief Marketing Officer at the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum. We are America's premier institution of Western history, art, and culture, located in Oklahoma City. I've been in this position for about 1.5 years now, so fairly new to the attraction side of things, but was for 8-9 years or so on the DMO side, head of marketing for Visit Oklahoma City. So more experience from a DMO perspective than from an attraction perspective, but a lot of our visitorship is from tourism to Oklahoma City, and so have not left the tourism space. So yeah, most of you are probably not familiar with the museum other than what we've been doing on social media, and that's just fine by me. So much like pretty much every other museum in the world, we shut our doors for a couple of months back in March, and we had the idea of doing a social media takeover with our head of security, Tim, and we've gained a global audience since. So and things since then, we reopened. Actually, we're one of the first in that conversation as well. We reopened May 18th, and we have not seen pre-pandemic numbers except for this last weekend. We actually did pretty good. We had a promotion to push that and saw some good results. So we're encouraged by that.
That's so good to hear. I was obviously going to ask, coming on the heels of Memorial Day weekend, and just you're seeing lots of headlines, all over the place today of different gatherings, and some positive, some negative headlines, obviously. So how does the museum handle itself? How do you feel like your visitors, what was their well-being like? What did you notice? What did you observe?
Yeah, so I mean, the decision to reopen, period, was one that was it took a lot of thought. We were very intentional about that, prepared for it for a number of weeks. And we started with a set of guidelines that are the CDC recommendations that are a part of our everyday life if you leave your house at all now, as far as social distancing and sanitization stations and all the standard things of operating in this world now. But what we've tried to do is show that we've put together those recommendations, but in a way that's on brand. And so we kind of repackaged it as the Cowboy way. We talk about masks. Cowboys have been wearing masks for years. I've got mine right here. And so we've been kind of lighthearted about it, but not in a way that indicates that we're not taking this seriously. It's just more on brand, I should say, than lighthearted. So we were intentional about getting that message out even before we opened. We've been kind of beating that drum ever since opening. And then this last week, we had the idea to build on the social media success that we've been able to have. We've had some fun back and forth with Tim's mug. This is my mug, not Tim's. And so we came up with a promotion that would be Find Tim's Mug. I hid Tim's mug, and we knew that not everyone that was following us would be able to travel, but hopefully we would get some regional travel, some locals, hid 6 different mugs around the museum. We put together wanted posters that we handed out to everyone, let them know that they've been deputized once they came in. And we had some pretty great success with that. Lots of action on the hashtag Cowboy. And our numbers for Saturday, Sunday, and Monday were pre-pandemic, above average. So that's encouraging. Now, obviously, you get back into the middle of the week during times when you would have really depended on tourists to your destination, and we're not seeing those numbers.
Right.
We're anywhere from 40 to I think we've been up to 50% of the previous, but 20 to 40 is what we were running this last week, and we anticipate seeing those numbers for the next couple of weeks. But again, we know that we're one of the first that's open, and that we're in a different position than a lot of people.
No, that's encouraging to hear. I'm glad, certainly, and love all the creativity and, keeping everything on brand like you're talking about. That's really great. Staci, with a destination like Florida, obviously, you guys have, you've been walking through your phases of reopening. What have you experiencing? What are you hearing? And how did the holiday weekend go?
Yeah, I think, I don't have actual numbers up to date from like our gates from some of our cultural institutions, but prior to that, I know that they're all kind of at various degrees depending on where you were or where they're located across the state. Some areas are, in just kind of starting to reopen. Some areas have been on the opening path for the last couple of weeks. But I think the conversation is all kind of about what Seth was talking about. What does opening look like? How do we keep our visitors safe? Lots of museums and experiences are, opening areas where they feel like there's appropriate social distancing, but keeping some of the like more kids and hands-on areas closed. So I think that's part of it. Some of the challenge also is like a lot of these museums and experiences are reliant on volunteers and docents, and they tend to be retired. And so how do they handle like that, that docent-free experience? The challenge also with like ticketless gates. There's this like technological evolution that's required, and maybe some of the larger spaces were already on that way or already had those kinds of things in place. But the smaller places like the Hemingway House, I don't know if they do or not, but, looking at smaller institutions like that who are used to just like taking tickets at the door, have a big uphill battle to climb, not to even mention the funding to implement something like that.
Yeah, no kidding. Richard, I think you just stepped off camera, but I'd love to hear from, from what you see and what you have been seeing with regards to the kind of cultural experiences. Obviously, one of the things that is so important with cultural experiences is learning how to continually evolve and tap into, the future travelers, right? The next generation of travelers and things like that. So in light of kind of where we are, what are you hearing? What are you seeing on the ground? How are you, working with the cultural attractions that you're working with? What are you seeing? I'd love to kind of get your perspective.
Very good question. Thanks for asking. The breadth of what we're dealing with nationally aside, of I say that the timed or scaled reopenings, not only state by state, but counties within each state, is really daunting for many of the cultural partners. Where Seth and Staci are sitting, respectively, now in the country, it's available. Where we're sitting here on the West Coast, and many other parts of the country, it's still not, even though they're in phase 2, inching into phase 3 of reopening. So when you think of cultural institutions broadly, brick and mortar, even outdoor spaces, botanical gardens, zoos, and aquariums that have a lot of outdoor space are still closed. And when they do reopen, what I've been hearing from the various partners that we work with and the projects that we facilitate, both locally, here, in the short term, because there's a lot of requests coming up to us here, being we're based in the Bay Area, but also those nationally that we're working with are just really focusing on, first of all, being smart about the process. Reaching out to their business partners who are also anxious to get ready for the activation. And that would be all their third-party booking partners and all their online ticketing partners and all their API integrations at gate entry, as to how to really ensure the customer journey starts really at the time of their intent to come to the attraction. And I think that's really the critical point, is that no matter what a person wants to go, see and enjoy, right now we've been working with folks in the arts and arts festivals. It's arts festival season. We're getting ready for all the summer state fairs are going to happen. That's a cultural moment.
Right.
People going on their road trips to the regional parks and the state parks. Campgrounds are seeing, such an increased request for, access to get to campground sites where before they didn't until later in the year, because people will travel, in their own vehicle, in their RVs, and do that American road trip this year, whether regionally or, maybe across country. So from a cultural perspective, it really hits, all aspects. And one area that's really been talked about is, live performances, concerts outside. Well, think about the symphonies, think about the operas, think about all of those, jazz centers across the country that are all wanting to open up their doors, and it's just not local business that they survive on. It's the tourists. So they're really all having to recalibrate, and so it's been interesting to see the variety, but the similarities that they're using, as Seth has said and Staci has talked about. But here in California, we look for the day that we can, go back into the museums and go back into the botanical gardens and go back to a festival. But right now we're still unable to do that.
So all of a sudden it just dawned on me and kind of occurred. We've got really great coast to coast representation right here, right? I mean, Richard on the West Coast and Staci there, in Florida. So it makes me wonder, this is going to be some really good perspective, I think. What you just teased out, I think, for the DMOs and even, for the attendees that are representing different cultural attractions and things like that, certainly now more than ever, it seems appropriate to be thinking about new partnerships, right? Or re-engaging maybe underdeveloped partnerships, co-ops, things like that. Maybe how can we think about packaging, experiences together for our, for those visitors and more transient regionally, right? Somebody please feel free to jump in there. It's been a really interesting thing to think about, because Richard, certainly you're on one end, like you said, you're not open yet, right? And Staci,
Right.
You are, right? So you've got different levels of engagement there. What are you guys seeing and thinking about that?
Well, I think I can jump in from the attraction side and say that that's certainly an opportunity for those in the DMO space to help us in the attraction space. I think as attractions, everybody's busy. Everybody's trying to figure out how to function now. So it's not one over the other, but from an attraction standpoint, we're trying to figure out the literal nuts and bolts of how we open. And once you do open, keeping that experience safe and enjoyable. And so when you're determining things like closing down water fountains and where to set up the hand sanitizer and things like that, any sort of help in pulling together packages, helping attractions think of it broader, just beyond their own doors, because we're looking at come one, come all, anyone that will show up, local, regional, and all the money spends the same as far as we're concerned. And so from a DMO perspective, if there's opportunities to kind of lead the charge in pulling that from a destination perspective and help attractions work together, putting together those lists of attractions that are open, helping to promote them beyond what they're capable of doing currently, because just like everyone else, our budgets have certainly been affected by this. And so any kind of pooling that we can do together, any sort of rising tide that lifts all boats, would be appreciated.
Yeah.
Josh, to that point, I'd like to kind of hop in, because you kind of hear from Seth about the challenges of, the day-to-day challenges of reopening. Right. And in some ways, Staci and the people in Florida that are reopening are going to provide some real lessons learned to the people that are not yet open, because and I think, Disney and Universal and SeaWorld announcing this week their opening plans over June and July will be really good guideposts. But there's nobody better than a DMO to connect the communities. And I think DMOs have an opportunity in this time to really cement their value proposition to their communities. Because again, if the Seths of the world are all focusing on, where do I put the hand sanitizer and how to, other than the brilliant Tim campaign, I mean, we're focusing on a lot of things. And if 95% of the businesses in travel and tourism or small businesses, they're all going through a lot of real tactical things right now. So the extent that a DMO can build some connections within the cultural heritage, the attractions within the community, and link them up to other businesses, be it art galleries or brew pubs, there's an opportunity to build some incredible relationships that hadn't existed before. And there's nobody better to do that, nobody more capable of doing that than the DMOs in all of our communities. So I think, again, given this time, that's a huge opportunity to make some local connections and provide some platforms to allow those partnerships to evolve and grow, and hopefully become partnerships that are really, really strong when we get back to the good times.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I would say that, three good things, if I were to look at this optimistically, that have come out of this crisis is, one, everyone's been forced to become like really creative problem solvers, Two, I think that there is this enhanced collaboration and information sharing where you're finding competitors talking together and sharing, like, how are you doing this? And cultural institutions have often led the way in terms of creativity and exploration and experimentation. And so I think particularly for this group of people, I think there is also this freedom to try things out and to share. So I hope that there is increased collaboration and creativity. I hope that, not every institution has to reinvent the wheel or figure out how to do things, that there are lessons learned, and there is a platform and a way for us to continue to share that, because we're all going to be better off because of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I just, the shared knowledge is really important, but there is no silver bullet. And so whether you're looking at IAPA guidelines, AZA, American Alliance Museums, the Culinary Institute of America, especially when you have dining components, the Restaurant Association, remember, we're just not attractions. We're also, food and beverage destinations. Sometimes it's boutique, sometimes it's local cuisine, and understand that those experiences all playing in place. There's some really great best practices that have been put out and guidelines. It's really being able to distill them down. So what our organization's been doing is really kind of combing through a lot of those conversations that are being talked about separate from the data and the science, because that sits in one trunk. How do you take the next 3 to 6 trunks of information, which are, how do we pulse in? What does staggered arrivals look like? What does our modified hours do to also our ticket price? What does that do to the guest experience? How does that affect school groups versus, just a regular local outing? And when do we make the modifications to our food and beverage programs or our retail programs? Remember, museums, I've worked with the Museum Store Association for years and other, cultural partners within the cultural space. Each of them are looking at ways to optimize the best guest experience, but to support their partners as well. So if you're in a destination, or if you're in a brick and mortar location, you kind of have to go up to 30,000 feet before you even open your front doors and say, what will this look like and how will it feel? Put yourself in the customer's shoes, knowing, and when we all walk out our door right now, for the most part, we're wearing a mask when we go to the store, you go to the restaurant, you go to the dry cleaner, wherever you go. What will you do with your own internal policies should someone not comply? And I know one of the questions that came up is, how do you deal with guest non-compliance? And it really comes down to your internal policies as an organization that are also being supported by your city and county. I think layering it with the policies of your local jurisdiction is the best way to go. It, as I said at the very beginning, it varies state by state, county by county, across our country. So if there was a uniform process, it would make it so much easier. But earlier this morning on a couple other webinars I sat on, that was one of the conversations. There is no uniformity. We have to create it now as we go.
I know, Barry does ask this great question. Seth, I want to toss this to you. Do you have plans, and are you already needing to deal with, potential guest non-compliance, right? And then the other piece of Barry's question was, does the pre-pandemic visitation allow for adequate social distancing? So as you think about pre-pandemic, I know you said you've been there 1.5 years now. What did that visitation look like in density and all that kind of stuff? And how are you, how is that shifting for you? But then the second part of that I'd love for you to touch on is, Did you see any, non-compliance, and how are you planning for that were it to come up?
Well, yeah, so pre-pandemic, one of the ways in which we've been affected is one of our largest events is typically over Memorial Day weekend. It's our annual chuck wagon gathering. It was going to be our 30th year. We ran about 3,300 people through here last year on that weekend. That's been moved to Labor Day. And so we did not run those kinds of numbers, but we looked at average numbers for weekends in May. And we are a 200,000 square foot facility. So we are fortunate. About 100,000 of that's accessible to guests, but then we have an additional 100,000 outdoor space that we just opened. And so 200,000 square feet total, when you're running hundreds of people through, there's plenty of room to social distance. And so we're fortunate in that regard. We sit in an area within Oklahoma City called the Adventure District with a number of cultural attractions around us, one of which is our local science museum. They are a large facility, but they're very hands-on. And there are areas that's certainly more compact. And so those are things that they're thinking through. They have not opened yet. They're looking at opening in June. So as we looked at it and put together our guidelines, as Richard said, we followed not only national, but you have to go to state and then local. We don't have one central leader in this, unfortunately. Man, wouldn't that be great if we had leadership? But as we were putting those things together, I think taking that process over a couple of weeks really allowed us internally to think through each and every one of those individually. And so what we came to was the policies that we were putting in place, our reaction and our way of enforcing those was not going to be dramatically different than our way of enforcing don't touch the art, don't mess with other guests. It's all fairly standard as far as that's concerned. It's just different than what we're used to.
But,
so
how would you, let's say it's next weekend or it's midweek and there's an altercation on the floor between customers and not social distancing, like people coming into people's space when they shouldn't. How is your team equipped to manage that situation?
Yeah, so we have, Tim is our actual director of security. We have a security staff that is on floor, and they are trained to deal with those sort of things, whether we're in a time of social distancing or not. And so again, we're fortunate as an organization where certainly before COVID-19, we had situations where people didn't always act as they should in our museum. And I think as we walked this out and decided how we would handle these different scenarios, the conclusions that we came to were they're different, but our way of handling them is strikingly similar to the way that we would handle any sort of other incorrect behavior. And so we are not policing social distancing. We're not following behind people, making absolutely sure and shooing them away if they are within 6 feet of each other. We're leaving it up to personal responsibility, essentially, on that. We've made those guidelines explicitly clear through signage throughout the museum. You can hardly turn around without hitting a sign here now, giving you some sort of direction. But again, in a space as large as ours, running a few hundred people through here on a day, it's not been an issue. Masks is one of those that's been kind of politicized, unfortunately, very unfortunately. And so our local recommendations from a state and city perspective are masks are not required. And so as we looked at that, the determination that we came to was we're not going to get into the business of enforcing masks either. But we are setting the example of everyone on our staff is wearing a mask. And again, through that Cowboy Way signage, what we tried to do was take it out of the realm of a political conversation and say masks, Cowboys have worn those for different reasons for years, and we're doing it now for your protection. And if you want to, great, but we're not going to make you.
For some reason, when you describe that, I just picture some kids going, so if we act up. We might get to meet Tim.
Don't give anybody any ideas, Josh.
No, but
Making an assumption that kids are actually on Twitter.
well, it is true, but I love it. One of the things about cultural experiences, as we all on this call know, right, is they really are. We can try to curate them as a brand and curate them as kind of a DMO or an organizing, body, but to some level, as an individuals, they really are self-curated. You know what I mean? We will, like you talked about a little bit, Richard, we will get in the road trip. And, my family did over the weekend as well. So, and we're seeing that. We're seeing the data reflect some road trip kind of stuff happening, which certainly then kind of introduces the idea of even, reintroduces, we've known it's been around, but traveling with pets, right? Staci, you were talking about that, earlier in the week, and the opportunities even that now creates on top. So it really is a lot. How are you guys thinking about tapping into that emotional power of the individual curated experience? What are you guys thinking about that?
To me?
Sure.
Okay. I think that's the way that people have always traveled in Florida, and that's kind of the position that we've always taken at Visit Florida, is really trying to get people to do, many things. We're fortunate to be a destination that has basically anything under the sun, which makes it a tremendous marketing challenge when you're like, we're a destination with everything. Like, how do you narrow that down? But that is really what we are. And so you can come to the beach in a place like Sarasota, as well as experience amazing art and history at the Ringling. So you can do that all in a Saturday. I think that's one of the things that, like, Floridians especially are really fortunate to live here and to be able to access that at any point in time. And people spend time, their vacation time, they save up their money to experience the thing that Floridians get to do any day of the year. And I think that we as Floridians, like, don't take that for granted, or we try not to take that for granted. But we're curating that stuff on social. We're promoting that personalized experience. And yeah, I don't know if that answered the question.
No,
though.
no, I think so. One other kind of follow up too is Seth, you're in a different position a little bit now because you are open, right? And then Richard, then you're not yet. But it makes me wonder if we are now, and there's been a little bit of chatter on this, but I wonder if, when we think about curating these experiences, these cultural experiences, and we think about the quality of the experiences, are you guys thinking or planning, post-visit survey, right? I mean, how was your experience? Did we meet your expectations? Did you feel at threat or at risk in any way? I'm just wondering how you're kind of engaging the sentiment around that, even with visitors.
Yeah, go ahead, Seth. Go ahead.
Well, I can tell you from our end, that's something that we're not doing a direct exit survey. We probably should. I think being open just a week, we're still kind of figuring this thing out. But certainly because of the loud voice that we have now compared to what we had previously on social, we're gauging that on social media constantly. And that's been one of the challenges in this pandemic, is the differences throughout the country and the world in what people's experiences are. And so when we first posted about, we made the decision to open about a week and a half before we ever had said that we were going to open on social. And we knew as a marketing team that we need to be very intentional about how we handled that message, where it's something that seemed like maybe that next cautious step in this part of the country could seem crazy to other people in the world whose pandemic experiences are currently different. And so we showed imagery throughout the week of, again, kind of lighthearted, but making sure that we take it seriously, of, Tim cleaning up around the museum and posting some of the signage of how we were going to handle these things. And then finally that Friday before the Monday that we opened, we said, okay, we are going to open. And as we monitored that, we had one person, and nothing against California, but I believe they were in California. And the response was, "You're opening? Are you crazy?" And that was that. There was nothing more than that. And we've certainly had some who are on the other side of that perspective of, saying things when we post things about masks. But again, we're trying to ride that in the middle and just say that, this is what we're doing to try to provide a safe, enjoyable experience. Please join us in that. It's here. We'd love for you to come. If you're unable to, we'll continue to try to feed up content that's relevant online and through our social media.
Yeah. Richard, jump in there.
Yeah, I think it kind of backing out of it a little bit, that this is not the first time that we face challenges like this. We've had terrorism, natural disasters, other epidemics that I think a lot of people, have forgotten about. And what did we do to respond then? And, I think about innovations, that are certainly being discussed. And when we think about the innovations that we've all, who even knew Zoom 60 days ago? I mean, a lot of us probably did, or that, really, how homeschooling, all telecommuting, all the things that are happening in our industry today, in our world today. And I'll get back to that in a moment. But, facing challenges before, and a recent article that I read this week, which also brings another spin to the cultural heritage experiences across our country, is that there's the travel part of it. And when you get to a destination, visitors a lot of time for the first time from out of town, what do? They get on a hop off bus, or they grab a bike or some sort of, segue, and they get out there and enjoy it. Well, Buffalo had a really great article that came out this week. And, I think Patrick Kaler and his team have done a really great job of telling some of those stories as well as other destinations. And they featured a gentleman who runs the big bus hop on there in Buffalo. And the issue is that, ways that they're utilizing what happened in the past. Think about 9/11 and how that pushed people. If you saw a package, you just stepped away, you didn't go. There was that fear around what safety and security was post 9/11. We've all adapted to that. I think we've adapted much more quickly, but that's an example of transportation sector is really going to be struggling in communities because they have to sanitize the buses. They have to make sure that there's, in some cases, depending upon city county ordinance, the plexiglass between the seats, no different than what's happening with some airlines for international carriers. So the travel portion, the ground transportation, which is all part of the tour guides, hopping on off the buses, getting people excited about coming to your museum, Seth, and dropping them off, or Staci, they're going in and around Orlando, or they're in Tallahassee, or they're down in Miami. That's all changing. So that narrative, that innovation that comes around that, to me, is very, very exciting. And the opportunity for people to think back, not too far, and what solutions were utilized, but really how they need to be modified to meet that customer sentiment today, and build your KPIs. There's been some questions back and forth here on the chat about what do those KPIs look like? And yeah, they're going to change for staff. They're going to change for your customer. They're going to change, of course, with your budget. What are your indicators, just as a business? And so whatever your business plan was pre-COVID, you should be rewriting it. That's what we're doing for a lot of folks. So you got to be thinking about that, how you're each individually rewriting your own business plans and what you're going to do. That is a global phenomenon right now because it's a moving target. So the innovation that is really important to talk about.
I love the shout out to Patrick because he's actually tuned in. I don't know if you noticed that or not. So I love that. That's great, Patrick. And you and your team are doing a great job. I love that. I saw the same story, so it's great. We've got a great question, Staci. I'd love to toss to you about capacity, right? And when we are thinking about capacity, the thing I love about this that we've been talking about over the last several weeks is it kind of directs us toward the general theme around stewardship, right? I mean, and Will, you even said it well earlier, the DMO is just perfectly positioned to be the center, the steward, if you will, right? For lack of another term, the steward for your destination. And so, and say, Staci, so as you think about capacity, how are you guys preparing for that? Are you putting in plans now for messaging around capacity, or working with your local destinations on understanding their capacity and how maybe to message around that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think from a Visit Florida perspective, it really varies county by county. From a statewide perspective, the governor has really leaned into individual counties and the leadership within those counties to determine what's best and right for them. So we're leaning on the local local DMOs, the local areas, to kind of give the guidance to those organizations in terms of capacity. I mean, I think right now the governor has a 4-phased opening plan. I think we're just, from a statewide perspective, kind of beginning phase 2, which in some senses, like for restaurants, they're at 50% capacity. And so there's guidelines there. So I think obviously, like, our perspective is we rely on, like, you know, whatever the health professionals, the experts say. Those are the kind of the messaging that we try to convey is, you know, let's follow what the experts are saying and, like, follow those recommendations. But I do think in terms of stewardship and capacity and recreating experiences and collaboration, I think that there's a lot of opportunity here to think about changing the visitor experience. You know, we've seen most, like, a big shift to virtual.
Yeah.
I hope that that doesn't end as things open up. I think that there's so much opportunity, and, like, with opening the access to new audiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, like, that when you were talking about KPIs, like, I would definitely put that kind of in my business plan is like, what are these virtual experiences that I'm going to continue as an organization that not only can be revenue generators, but that's going to open up my experience to a global market or global audience.
Yeah, and you, Richard, you're talking about innovation. It's like there's something in my head. Streetsense, our team at Streetsense, we work with a lot of airports as well, right? And so many airports, we will develop systems for them to be able to show the user, you know, this traveler, right, where they are on the parking. Like, this deck is full, and this deck is not, or this area, right? This VIP parking is open here. So there is technology out there to give you know, those looking to travel, you know, some idea, some visualization at where you are with capacity. I wonder if this doesn't open up opportunities maybe for attractions or you know, live venues or other things like that to perhaps display that differently.
Yeah, I think that's going to definitely happen. I think real-time ticketing has been out there for well over a decade plus, but not everyone has had to utilize the technology because, you know, it could be just demand curves. They only have their seasonality, and the rest of the year, you know, it's like open the doors and please come, you know, and, you know, we'll take you all day long. But this has to be adapted ongoing. So that time ticketing, the pulse ticketing, the real-time dynamic pricing that's still out there for not only major theme parks and attractions, but museums and you know, art centers and, you know, performing arts. I think it's really important that everyone look at those options. There are various price points for each of the technologies based on what you're looking to consider. So it's not one for all, but yeah, I think it's really important. Mm-hmm.
I think that's a good project for Google. You know, Google has, like, those busy time, but they could do that in real time and then offer alternative suggestions. Like, if your plans are really busy in that moment, you know, like, here's a couple of other things that are maybe within walking distance. So talking about kind of curating and stewarding, like, a whole destination experience, like, come on, Google Travel, let's get on that.
We already know everything else about us, so.
Right. I'm sure somehow they're listening, right?
They're listening.
Seth,
Well, and Josh, I'll hop in there real quick and say I think one of the long-term changes that we'll see is a change in attitude for some of virtual visits and not seeing that necessarily as a threat to a actual visit. I think what this has shown us is it's not an either or. At a time when an actual visit is not possible, then a virtual visit is nice. And speaking of Google, we were certainly glad that we partnered with them in 2016 for their arts and culture project and had some virtual visits that we could dust off and point to. But I think what we've seen from our side of the business is that that's an extension of your brand. That's marketing. That's not a replacement for your experience, because nothing truly replaces the experience of going to a destination and experiencing that attraction directly.
Yeah, on our prep call, I loved it, Staci. You talked about this with regards to, like, the Mona Lisa moment, right? I mean, I think it's incredible. We all would might have an idea or would want to experience something virtually, but to your point, Seth, it does not take away from actually seeing something in person. Staci, tell us a little bit more about what you mean when you say the Mona Lisa moment.
Yeah, I mean, everybody knows what the Mona Lisa looks like. You know, you say Mona Lisa, you have the woman's face in your mind, but that doesn't stop, 3 or 4 hour lines at the Louvre, backing up to see this very small picture of what the Mona Lisa is, because there's nothing like seeing it in real life. What, Richard?
And also from very far away, you can
yes,
never get.
exactly, amongst lots of other heads. I mean, I think that these virtual experiences are really decreasing the barrier to people actually visiting in the future, because when I have limited time in a destination or for an experience, like there is risk associated with like selecting one choice over another. Like there's a lot of pressure in that decision. Virtually experiencing it is going to allow me to be a lot more convincing about the decisions that I make when I'm in destination. So I would, if I were a cultural institution, I would lean into those virtual experiences and really deliver a high quality experience to guarantee somebody wanting to visit in the future.
I love that you bring that up because, part of my background from Franklin, Tennessee, obviously Franklin has a long storied kind of heritage cultural tourism. One of the major drivers is, the Battle of Franklin. We've got a lot of historic houses, house museums, and great tours there, great tour operators there on the ground. And you would encounter those that say, no, we want you to come experience the museum, but don't take any pictures. Don't do anything,
right.
No, don't do anything. No, you can't do any of that, right? And there are others that are like, no, we need that actually. That helps us, right? And so, Seth, to your point, it's interesting, now we've sped up like our growth to digesting and consuming, some of this content in these ways. I love what I'm hearing from you. It sounds like both of you kind of think it's actually a positive thing, that all of that is kind of a good and will help in the long term.
Well, I think that it certainly can. You'd mentioned individual curated experiences previously, and I think one of the reasons why we hit on something with our Tim campaign was that it was essentially an individual curated experience. It was Tim, who is the everyday visitor. He's not an art expert, doesn't claim to be. He's just a good guy from Oklahoma, experiencing that museum. And I think that what we were able to show on social media was exactly that. And so, to your point of sharing that information on social, when I first started, I encountered a couple of different policies as far as photography and other things like that. And our stance has been share, by all means, share, take those pictures, show what that experience is for you. And we are far from any sort of Mona Lisa experience, but it's certainly been encouraging to see that kind of response. We had one young lady from Houston who posted on our hashtag this weekend. She came up, brought her cap and gown, and said that I wasn't able to have a graduation experience, but I was able to be here and look for Tim's mug, and posted a picture of her in her cap and gown in our rodeo gallery, throwing her cap in the air. And so she had obviously experienced it online, but that didn't stop her from coming, as if she'd seen everything. That encouraged her to come.
Yeah, and Lori's posts a great comment in here just about considering the disabled and creating virtual experiences. I think that is so huge. I'm sure, Richard, you see this kind of all across the nation because you work with so many here. It is such an important thing. Will you speak to what you're seeing there and how we are creating these experiences, whether virtual or not, but we are making them accessible for all?
Yeah, absolutely. The AR and the VR integration has been really adapted and adopted by just so many venues. Whether you're doing a winery tour, a distillery, you're in an art museum, you're going through a botanical garden, all those technologies are being utilized. And some of it certainly is beacon focused, where it activates where you're coming close to the next location, which I think for Lori's question on, disabled or those with impairments, being able to plug in and have the sensory experience, either whether it's, smell, touch, or sound, or sight, and adapting to that. So there are some really great best practices that, offline, Laura, I'd be more than happy to share. Feel free to reach out. But I feel that there's certainly the need that you do keep that in mind, that it's no different than a museum curating and an individual curating their experience. When you do go into that space digitally and you want to curate your own experience, what are you drawn to? Are you drawn to the visual, the video, the audio, or just, content? Each of us has our own mechanism as to what we're drawn to. No different than a museum curating an exhibit. It's not just about the content of what it's going to look like, it's how it's presented. Is it at eye level for an adult? Is it mid-level? Or is it, also at, waist level for a child who's going to run up and want to touch everything? And what does that look like, including certainly, Braille and other interpretations of translation? So all these things are being amplified and adapted as we speak in real time. And I think they're only going to become more important because of the world that we now live in, of this virtual, as Staci said, amplifying on the virtual experiences to help augment for those that just frankly can't get on a plane or in a car right now to go there because they're taking care of a family member who's sick, or, they're in a compromised immune system. So they don't want to even go to states that are open right now, that they do want to have access and not be excluded. Those are the things to keep. Some people do want to travel, but they just can't.
Yeah, right.
It's just the way that it is. And I think that's what we have to always think about.
So we've got just a couple minutes left, and to kind of wrap up, I'd love to get like a quick takeaway from all of us, including you, Will. Don't skip out on us here. So, but when we think about, the cultural experiences, how, in light of COVID, just give us all one takeaway, how to connect our cultural experiences where we are, that we represent, with those that are looking to get out and explore them. Staci, let's start with you.
I mean, I think one of the best things that's happened is this accessibility piece. Really, just, and I would say across the board, not only with cultural, that I'm seeing the inside of Jimmy Fallon's home. I'm seeing Jennifer Lopez dance on TikTok. I'm watching my favorite DJs spin from their balconies. So I think that this accessibility of the things that probably I wouldn't have access to. I'm not gonna I can't travel the world and go to a music festival for a weekend. I have kids, but there's still a part of me that wants to be able to do that. But I can bring my family into that and stream a DJ virtual festival over the weekend and introduce my kids to something that really makes me happy. So I think accessibility is really some of the best things, and really does connect people worldwide to the things that they love.
I love it. Accessibility. That's fantastic. Richard.
Because the cultural experience really hits all those quadrants that we talked about: art, entertainment, food, history, outdoor, music, all of that. I really kind of lean in on one of my favorite Charles Darwin quotes that says, it's not the strongest that survive, it's not the most intelligent that survive, it's really those that are most adaptable to change. And all of the businesses that we represent in this industry, I think that is applicable across the board, as we were talking about KPIs, internal customer discussions, the post follow-up to what's working and not working, being nimble and adaptable to the change, and know that you're going to stumble. There's going to be mistakes, and that's okay.
That's
just
totally okay. Yeah.
Keep moving forward and think innovatively. And now's the time to do it. Everyone's expecting it. If you don't, there's another conversation to have. So.
And now's the pressure's on you, Seth, because we've got some alliteration happening. We had adaptability, accessibility. What are you going to come up with?
Nothing with an A. Sorry. Oh,
Fail.
I don't like pressure. No, I think it kind of builds on that, though, without being alliterative. Different is what we keep talking about. And I think that it is those who succeed in moments like this are those that view moments like this as an opportunity. And it certainly has been an opportunity for us to reach audiences that would have not been interested previously. I can't tell you the amount of comments. I've got a page filled around here somewhere. The amount of comments that say, I had no idea a Cowboy Museum existed. I have no interest in Cowboy anything, but I'm all in on what you guys have. And so I think for us, and the way that we've approached it is, you know, everyone expected a virtual tour. Everyone expected the online arts and crafts and all those things. And we did those things because they're good things. They expected them because they're what we should be doing. But what is that way that we can do something different? And so what we've found is that voice for our institution through Tim and through our social. And we've done things a lot differently than we would have otherwise. We did not respond to every comment. We did things that you would never do from a social media perspective as a marketing person. We posted pictures that would be deleted immediately from your phone, not posted on social media. But it was because it was part of that authentic, individually curated experience of Tim. And so I think thinking of it differently and thinking of those audiences that wouldn't have had that access previously, but you can give access to now.
I love it. Will, close us out, my friend.
Yeah, I think Seth is onto that whole idea of thinking differently. There's a great line that I read early on, and you know, universal disruption is the perfect time for reinvention, and we all have that ability to do things we otherwise probably never ever would have done. A great example that we're seeing just this week is all the Major League Baseball parks opening up as drive-in movies, right? I mean, it's things that you would never imagine happening, never could have imagined, but unique partnerships and thinking out of the box to get exposure. I guess going back to the, you know, accessibility and all that, I think another thing is, again, for a DMO, and there's never been a better time to be the centerpiece for the community and connecting people that you otherwise wouldn't have connected. I'll never forget being at eTourism Summit, I believe 2 years ago. Atlas Obscura came out and showed us, you know, all these amazing things. And I typed in Tallahassee, Florida, which I figured, you know, having lived here for 12 years, I would have, it's not a big place. I'd probably know about it. I didn't know half of the things they were talking about in my own community. So you think about a DMO and the ability to refocus on the people in the community. We know that's going to be the logical evolution of how destinations are going to come out of this. Like Seth, everything was in, you know, the fall with the weekend was local, but it's going to gradually come back. But it's an incredible time to really focus on that. And for the attractions that are on the call, and local tour operators, things like that, I think it's a great time to engage that DMO and say, here's 3 things. Connect me with 5 cool people that we can share. And the community goes beyond just local too. I mean, I think it's other like-minded businesses across the country, to some of the things Staci's been talking about. I mean, I'm a Cowboy Museum here, and then I get another country Western Cowboy Museum somewhere else. How do we work with each other? You know, we can learn a lot and cross-pollinate some great ideas in this time.
Love it. Well, guys, we're technically a couple minutes over. Thanks for all of you that tuned in and to the end. As you may or may not know, you'll receive a follow-up email with some great takeaways to you. This will be posted. The replay will be posted on YouTube and on Connect's website. Can't say thank you enough again for tuning in. All of you for sticking it out with us, and feel free again, if myself, Richard, Seth, Staci, Will, any of us can be of a help to you, don't hesitate to reach out, say hello. Any way we can come alongside you, we want to, and thanks again just for tuning in.
And Josh, again, I want to thank you for everybody that's still here. This is was going to originally be the last marketing webinar, but because of the engagement success and the feedback we've got, Streetsense has agreed to continue this on through the rest of June. So I'd just like to let you know that we've got a great tour operator webinar again tomorrow as part of the series. We'll be back next week on this same topic with local tours and local tour operators and local attractions in partnership with Arrival. And then Josh and I are working on some really exciting topics to round out the rest of June. So if you have any suggestions or recommendations or topics that you really want to hear on, please share that with Josh or I, and we'll make sure to use that as we're curating the remainder of the month. But thanks.
Absolutely. Again. Yes. Everybody have a great day.
All panelists, we appreciate you greatly.
Absolutely. Have a great day. We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, guys.
folks.
Nice to see you. Take it easy.